I promised you some answers to some questions about intervention, so that's what I'm going to do next, is talk about how we intervene for behavior problems. And again, just as an overview, we've talked about assessing the function, and we're going to kind of revisit that in a little bit this afternoon and look at the findings that you have from your assessments. We talked about short-term prevention and some of the problems with short-term prevention. And now what we're going to talk about is replace. How do you replace behavior problems? We went to a local school for kids with developmental disabilities, and my connection's here.
I shook it up for you.
Put a log on that fire. Is that what the commercial, how the commercial goes? Like that? Now I'm not going to open it just yet. I'm no fool. We went to a school for kids with developmental disabilities, and we basically said, give us the 3 or 4 most difficult kids that you have. When we do research, oftentimes schools are reluctant to, have us there. But when we do research on behavior problems, they're yours. Tim, Hal, and Ben were the 3 most difficult kids in this school, and unfortunately, they were also in the same classroom in this school. Now, we can talk about why that might not be a good idea, because there are a lot of reasons. We'll maybe get to that later, but they were there. Same classroom, a really good teacher, highly skilled, well-meaning, one of those teachers could get hit in the head 5 times a day and bounce right back the next day and really be in there. So she was great. So Tim, Hal, and Ben, what's the first thing we did?
Do a baseline.
I hear assessment. We did assessment, okay? 2 things, part of it, one was the baseline and one was the functional assessment. So here you see, we were in their classroom, so this is now not a laboratory study. We went into their classrooms, we observed them in the comings and goings of crazy days that people had in a behavior problem classroom. Here you see Tim, about 10% of his day, he was engaged in some form of behavior problems. He would bite his hand, he would scream, he would cry, lots of behaviors like that. Hal, about 20% or more of his day was engaged in behavior problems. He was the kid I mentioned to him before who would slap himself in the face really hard, among other things. Ben, about 20 to 30% of his day engaged in some kind of behavior problems. He would pinch people, he would rip things off the wall, he would run around. He also, by the way, did the worst thing a kid can do. Now, you often wonder, is it self-injury or aggression or screaming? No, the worst thing that a kid can do in a school is to mock the teacher. He would do something and go, ha, ha, ha. Just drove her crazy. He would also, he would go up behind people who had difficulty walking and push them over. But he would do it with such a cute little grin on his face that he never really got in trouble for it. He just would be very cute. So 3 boys with multiple chronic behavior problems. These kids had problems for years. We then did our functional assessment. We did a combination of the motivation assessment scale and a functional analysis where we changed things to look what was going on. For Tim, his were escape motivated. So when he got frustrated and couldn't do something, he would start to cry, bite his hand, scream. Hal, also escape motivated. And Ben, he was what we would call multiply motivated. So some behaviors occurred to escape, some behaviors occurred to get attention. So they made up a really good group of kids. After we did our assessments, what did we do? Okay, what we want to do then is say, if you're doing this to escape, can we give you another way to tell us this? How do you teach that? I'll give you an example. For Tim, if he had trouble putting on his jacket, for example. Jackets, by the way, are these outer clothing that we put on in New York when the temperature gets really cold. Just want to make sure you all understand cultural differences in the United States. So if he had trouble, if he was going to go outside and he had trouble putting on his jacket, he might cry, he might bite his hand, sometimes he'd even fall to the floor and bang his head. So what were we going to do? We wanted to teach him to ask for help. How do you teach him to do that? Well, we did a kind of a modified, this is 20 years ago, we did incidental teaching. And incidental teaching means you find naturally occurring situations that are teaching situations, you use it as an opportunity to teach, and you have natural consequences. It's time to go outside, we say, put your coat on. He put his coat on, and he'd get stuck. Now, we knew he was going to get stuck. And the reason why we knew he was going to get stuck is because I tied a knot in the arm of his jacket. Okay. I'm sick. Thank you. By the way, on your feedback form, make sure you mention that I'm sick. Now, just to show you I'm not so terrible, before he got upset, we give him his coat, say, put your coat on, he gets stuck. Before he got upset, and this is really important, we'd prompt him. He'd get stuck, we'd say, help me, help me. Good. Untie the coat, help him with it, send him outside. Next time it's time to go outside, put your coat on. He goes in, gets stuck, because to put the knot back in there. Say, help me, help me. Put it on, send him out, go outside, okay? He doesn't really know what the words help me means. He was somewhat verbal, so he could say the words, he would repeat them, but he doesn't really know what they mean, but we're teaching him now, which means you say these words, things get better. Put your coat on, he'd stick it in. Say, good. Untie the knot, put his jacket on, send him outside. Now, the reason why you said help me, by the way, is part of the trick of teaching this is people get uncomfortable with pauses, and you rely on pauses. I mean, you want to delay a little bit so that you're not just jumping in there. We have a video that I won't show you of a teacher. We were trying to get this kid to be independent and to communicate, and she would always jump in and help him, and we were trying to get her to stop. So he'd be putting his work away in a box, and she'd help him put it away. Like take her aside and say, stop it, let him do this. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, I know you're uncomfortable, but it's good for him to do it on his own. Same thing with prompts. Sometimes you want to delay. Even though it's a little uncomfortable, it will help them respond. So next time it's time to go outside, put your coat on. He gets stuck, say, too fast. You wait, he says, help me, great, put it on, send you outside. Next time, put your coat on, get stuck. Good. She said, help me. Put your coat on. What I'm going to do is quickly fade my prompts. Now, what I don't do in this is wait until you've got 90% correct for 100 trials over 2 weeks. No. When he's ready to go, we go. If he's ready to do it on his own, we move ahead. And if he's getting frustrated, we might pull back, okay? Because I don't want him, if you make it too hard, it's just going to be something he's going to try to escape from. So we're going to make it really easy for you. Say, help me go. It's time to tie your shoes. Tie your shoes. Well, he gets stuck. Why did he get stuck? Because we put knots in the shoelaces, okay? Say, help me, help me. All throughout the day, we picked situations that were typically frustrating for him. We set them up, meaning we created the situation, made sure he had a couple of examples of it, taught him whenever you get in these difficult situations, say, help me. Why not just one situation? Because we want him to generalize. We want him to learn that whenever you get stuck, even in a new situation, if you say these magic words, help me, things will be better. In fact, his teacher said, if you can see here, he used help me a lot. That's what these shaded areas, his use of the phrase help me at first. Teacher would say, what's your name? In the past, he would say Tim. Now, when the teacher says, what's your name? He said, she wasn't too thrilled with us. But the answer was, help him. Okay, well, this is the most important thing for him right now. If we can get him to understand that when you get stuck, when you get frustrated, say, help me, and people help you, you're going to use it throughout the day. Quickly, and we'll talk about later what happens if this doesn't happen, but over the course of a couple of weeks, it went down to an acceptable level. It didn't disappear, him saying, help me, but he didn't ask it now in all situations. He started to understand when he should and should not use it. At the same time, his behavior problems went down. Okay? How? What we taught him was, one of the difficult situations for him was when people would ask him a question and he didn't know the answer to it. So you'd ask him, where do you live? He didn't know how to answer the question, and he'd start to slap himself. So we taught him to say, I don't understand, okay, which made more sense than help me. Okay, so if somebody asks you a question, you don't know the answer to it, say, I don't understand. That's what we do. We say, I don't understand. Someone either repeats the question or simplifies it or whatever. When we taught him to do that, behavior problems go down. For Ben, we taught him to say, help me, like we had with Tim, because he got frustrated in situations. We also taught him to get attention from the teacher, because a lot of his behavior problems were attention getting. The way we did that was we set up in a group, kind of a circle session. We had someone sit behind him, so in a group session, he wouldn't have one-to-one attention. So what we taught him was when you're in a group and you want attention, basically we prompt him to raise his hand, and then we taught him to say something that would get attention. Now this is important. What would you say to a teacher to get attention that would work and that wouldn't be annoying? Okay, because if you go like this, teacher, 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 all day long, that's annoying. Teachers don't like that. That would become a behavior problem. So what we did was went into a regular class, and he was about third grade. We went to a third grade class and looked around and said, what do good kids do to get a teacher's attention? Good kids get teachers' attention, but they don't do it by going, come here, come here, come here. They do it by things like, teacher, is this right? Or am I getting this right, or could you help me? They solicit attention, and teachers like to give attention in that way. They like to feel that they're actually helping somebody. So what we taught him to say was, am I doing good work? It was a way to solicit attention from a teacher that we thought would be acceptable. When we did that, his behavior problems went down. We then had a summer break. That's what this break is here. We came back now next year. So this is a pretty long project. This is about a month and a half. This is about 2 or 3 months. This is about 3 or 4 months of baseline. We then intervened in their classrooms. This is their behavior in their classrooms. Then we have a summer break. Summer break, they come back to new classrooms. Why are they new classrooms? Because they don't have to be in the behavior problem classroom anymore. So they come into new classrooms. Tim does really well. Ben does really well, but Hal doesn't. Now, I'm always more interested in the kids that don't do well, because that kind of leads to what we do next. Hal, new classroom, new teacher. Teacher asks him a question like, Hal, where do you live? And Hal says, Anniston. Teacher says, Hal, where do you live? Anniston. Hal, where do you live? Anniston. Hal, where do you live? And then you could see him, it was almost like he was thinking to himself, wait, there was something else I used to do. Oh, yeah. And then the teacher says, okay, I'll come back when you've calmed down. What happened? Well, teacher asked him a question he didn't know the answer to. He said, I don't understand, but he didn't say it in a way that the teacher understood him. So the teacher, instead of helping him, asked the question again, asked the question again. He then hit himself, and then she stopped asking. Okay? So he got out of it by hitting himself. So you see the behavior problems come back, and you see him over time not saying, I don't understand anymore. Now at that point, one option was to go teach the teacher. When he says, I understand, you help him. Instead, what we did was a booster session for him. We got him to articulate it more clearly, got him to slow it down, say, I don't understand. Comes back to the classroom, teacher's there, sitting there, I was in the room. She sits down with him, asks him a question like, Hal, where do you live? He says, I don't understand. And the teacher goes, oh my goodness. Turns to me, she goes, is that what he's been trying to tell me? I thought he was just perseverating. Is that what he's been trying to tell me? And my answer was, in the best Columbo I could think of, I don't know. She turns back to him and says, you live at 71 Smith Street. Where do you live? 71 Smith Street. Good. We didn't have to teach her how to be a good teacher. She was already a good teacher. He had to communicate clearly. Once he could communicate clearly, she knew what to do. The intervention wasn't time out. It wasn't hitting him. It wasn't reprimanding him. It was helping him when he says, I don't understand. He says, I don't understand. She responds. His behavior problems come back down. We followed them up one more year, 3-year study now, to see, are they communicating with people appropriately? Are people responding to them? Are their behavior problems down? Okay? That's the point. I can come up with an intervention that'll work with you, but it won't work with the next person. It won't work out in the community. You need an intervention that's going to work with the world. You don't want to go to McDonald's and have the guy at McDonald's, you have a person who bites their hand. And the guy at McDonald's goes, wait a minute. Operational definition of a hand bite is any time the teeth touch the back of the hand. That's a hand bite. Hop over the counter, restrain them on the floor, and say, I'm supposed to hold them here now for 10 minutes. You don't want that for many reasons. It's not going to happen. But the guy at McDonald's will know, if I hold out my hand and say, help me with my change, he'll know how to do that. Okay? And if you're getting frustrated because you can't get a response, you need to teach them the response that they have to get. Okay? What's the world going to respond to? So what we're shooting for is an intervention that not just works in the traditional sense, but works over time and works with people who are not specifically trained. Okay? That's the point. We don't want to have to train the world. Now, some of you are already in settings where you're going to have to train people. What we're trying to do is get beyond that. Let me give you an example.